Imagine waking up one morning and the sun just doesn't quite rise.
Right.
It's there in the sky, technically, but it looks like a smudge, like the moon.
Yeah, just this pale disk.
Exactly. And the air is freezing, even though it's, the middle of summer. You wait a week, a month, a year, the crops die, the rivers turn choked and gray.
It sounds like the end of the world.
It really does.
Yeah.
You have no scientific explanation, no satellite data. You just know that the world has plunged into this terrifying, starvation-inducing darkness.
Mm-hmm.
And look, that is not a pitch for some dystopian sci-fi movie. That is the verified historical reality of the year 536 AD.
Which scientists literally call the worst year to be alive in human history.
Right. Geologists know it happened. Historians know it happened. But what if I told you that a 500-year-old French poem suggests this wasn't a freak accident?
That it was actually programmed.
Yes, a programmed cosmic mechanism. And maybe more importantly for you listening right now, that this mechanism has just turned back on. Welcome to the deep dive.
What's fascinating here is how often we misinterpret history because we refuse to look at the whole board.
Yeah, we totally silo everything.
Exactly. We compartmentalize. We keep the geologists in one room, the historians in another, and the mythologists are, locked in the basement somewhere.
Right. They never talk to each other.
But the most profound insights often come from synthesizing these seemingly unrelated fields to spot patterns that most people miss entirely.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we are looking at a stack of sources today that initially seem like they belong on completely different planets.
They really do.
The core of our deep dive today is a highly specific research report. It's titled MABUS, the Metaphysical and Historical Analysis. And the mission of this document is, it's ambitious.
Highly ambitious.
It argues that Nostradamus left us a prophecy that has been completely, utterly misunderstood for centuries.
Historically, whenever people talk about Nostradamus, they fall into this trap.
Oh, the tabloid trap.
Right. They treat his writings like a cheap fortune-telling parlor game. They read a cryptic quatrain, squint at the anagrams, and try to point a finger at a modern politician declaring, there's the bad guy.
Yeah.
It's an obsession with theatrical villainy.
Right. Everyone wants to find the Antichrist hidden in a 16th century poem. It's a neat little package of good versus evil.
It's comforting in a weird way.
Yeah, exactly. But this report throws all of those cliche interpretations right out the window. It suggests that Nostradamus wasn't predicting a global dictator at all.
No, he was describing a recurring epochal shift.
A literal cosmic weather report. We're bridging French poetry, ancient pre-Christian Celtic mythology, verified celestial events, and modern geopolitics.
And that is a profound reframing. We are moving away from the idea of who is the villain and moving toward what is the planetary mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
The document argues that this infamous prophecy of MABUS is actually a highly scientific historical code.
So let's start with the code itself. We are focusing specifically on Nostradamus's Century 2, Quatrain 62, or C2Q62.
Right.
I'm going to read the original French text first, just to ground us in the actual source material, and then let's tear into the English translation.
Sounds good.
Okay, pardon my French. Literally. The original reads, MABUS, puis tous mourra, viendra de gens et bestes, une horrible défaite. Puis tout à coup la vengeance enverra, sans main soit fin concourra la comète.
The English translation provided in the report lays it out quite starkly. It says, MABUS will soon die, then will come. Horrible undoing of people and animals.
Wow.
Then all of a sudden one will see vengeance, 100 hand thirst hunger, when the comet will run.
Just on its face, that is a terrifying piece of poetry.
It really is.
A horrible undoing of people and animals. Thirst, hunger, vengeance. And you can completely understand why, for decades, people have read this and assumed MABUS is the bad guy.
Because the logic seems to be MABUS arrives, brings a comet, causes hunger, and destroys the world.
Right. But that is the fundamental conventional mistake the research report explicitly highlights.
Look closely at the grammar and the sequence of events in the translation. The text absolutely does not say MABUS arrives and causes an undoing.
Yeah, the wording is specific.
It says MABUS will soon die, then will come.
Oh, the sequence.
Exactly. The sequence is everything. The death or the end of MABUS is the prerequisite. MABUS doesn't cause the destruction. The absence or the removal of MABUS is the catalyst.
Okay.
It is the trigger that activates this massive sequence of natural disasters.
Okay, wait. Let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around this. So MABUS isn't the guy throwing the punch.
No.
Mabus is more like a retaining wall holding back a flood.
That's an excellent way to visualize it.
When the wall is standing, things are relatively stable. But when the wall falls, when Mabuse dies, that's when the horrible undoing rushes in. It's the collapse of a barrier, not the strike of a sword.
Yes. The text directly links the undoing of people, the thirst, the hunger, and the running comet to the aftermath of Mabus's end. So the report posits that Mabuse represents an era, an energy, or a massive structural entity whose conclusion initiates a violent planetary transition.
But if it's not just a single warlord, then what exactly is the retaining wall that falls? The report says we can't just guess. We have to literally tear the word Mabuse apart linguistically to find out.
Yes. The author of the report breaks the name down into two distinct linguistic components, Mabu and US.
Okay.
And to understand the first part, the root MB, we actually have to leave 16th century France entirely.
Which is such a wild pivot.
It is. We have to travel much further back in time and across the water to ancient pre-Christian Ireland.
When I first read the source, I had a double take. Like, how do we get from a French Renaissance astrologer to ancient Irish mythology?
Well, the report insists that MAB originates from the ancient Celtic goddess Med, spelled M-E-D-B, but pronounced and later spelled as Mev.
Med or Mev. And to understand the weight of this connection, we have to understand who she was in the Celtic worldview before the arrival of Christianity.
She was not a minor deity.
No. She was the absolute goddess of sovereignty, war, and fertility. But not in the, polished marble statue way we think of Greek gods.
Right, she wasn't sitting on Mount Olympus debating philosophy.
No. She represented a raw, unfiltered, brutal, earthly power. When I think goddess of war, my mind goes straight to Athena, someone in shining armor holding a bronze shield, very tactical and civilized.
But the report paints Medba as deeply, terrifyingly terrestrial. She didn't sit on a cloud, she was the physical landscape itself. She controlled the mountains, the fertile plains, the raging rivers. Her dominion was the raw forces of nature.
The report notes a very specific, vivid detail about her, too. To signify her deep connection to the natural world, she was often depicted in ancient lore, with living birds and squirrels resting on her shoulders and arms.
Which sounds a bit like a Disney princess until you read the context.
Yeah, right, like Snow White, but terrifying.
Precisely. It wasn't delicate or whimsical, it was meant to show her absolute terrifying harmony with feral nature.
The animals didn't just like her, they submitted to her.
Yes, the flora and the wild fauna submitted to her because she was the Earth's vital, aggressive energy personified. She was the life force that could nurture you or absolutely consume you.
And she was a warrior queen.
Yeah.
The historical and mythological texts specify she ruled the Connaught region in Western Ireland. And her dwelling place, a site called Cruachan, is fascinating. It wasn't just a stone castle.
Not at all.
According to ancient beliefs, Cruachan was built over a literal portal to the other world.
The Celtic concept of the other world is crucial to this analysis. It wasn't just an afterlife, it was viewed as an overlapping dimension. Sometimes divine, sometimes demonic.
Like a parallel universe.
Exactly. A place where the normal laws of physics, time, and human morality simply did not apply.
Wow.
So Med, ruling from a portal to this dimension, acted as the vital bridge between the supernatural chaotic energies of the earth and the physical structured reality of human politics and war.
The report says she was the absolute authority on sovereignty. Like, a human king couldn't just claim the throne because he had a big army. He could only legitimately rule if he was metaphorically or sometimes ritually married to her energy.
Yes, the land and the ruler had to be violently bound together. But, history happens. Christianity eventually sweeps across Europe and reaches the shores of Ireland.
And things change.
Drastically. The old pagan power structures are systematically dismantled.
Yeah.
And the report traces this fascinating, almost tragic, linguistic and cultural degradation of her name and her myth over the centuries.
The old gods go into hiding.
Or they are actively diminished in the cultural consciousness to make room for the new theology.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The ancient, terrifying Irish Med transitioned linguistically to the softer Maeve. And as these stories crossed the Irish Sea into English folklore over hundreds of years, the grand, mountain-shattering goddess of sovereignty and war was shrunk down into a fairy queen.
Queen Mab.
Exactly, Queen Mab. Most people today, if they know the name at all, know it from Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet.
Right, Mercutio has that famous speech about her.
Yes. But Shakespeare immortalized her not as a terrifying warrior goddess who controls the landscape, but as a tiny, mischievous fairy.
Driving a little walnut shell chariot.
Right, a chariot that drives over men's noses as they sleep, controlling their petty human desires and dreams.
Wait, I need to stop you there. We go from a terrifying Irish goddess of war and fertility, ruling from a literal portal to a demonic dimension, to a tiny fairy driving a little chariot in a Shakespearean comedy.
It's quite a downgrade.
It's a massive downgrade. Does this shrinking of her myth mean her actual energy in the real world was also shrinking? Or was it just our cultural memory failing us?
This raises a profoundly important question, and the research report addresses this exact distinction. Myths often hide core truths, but the truths themselves don't change size.
Right.
The document suggests that the fundamental energy of the Earth, that raw, under-the-surface power of sovereignty, martial force, and nature, did not shrink at all.
It was just us.
It was merely the human interpretation and respect for it that changed. We stopped seeing the terrifying goddess and started seeing a fairy tale, but the underlying planetary mechanism she represented remained perfectly intact, just waiting.
So, enter Nostradamus. He was a scholar of history, linguistics, and the occult.
A very well-read man.
Right. The report argues he would have known the ancient root of the word mab. He would have known it represented this massive ancient energy of war and natural sovereignty.
Absolutely.
But he didn't just write mab in his quatrain. He wrote MABUS. Why add the extra syllable?
And that brings us to the second half of the report's linguistic equation, the US suffix.
Okay, let's hear it.
In classic linguistics, particularly in Latin and Old French, which Nostradamus used heavily, adding the suffix us to a noun or a female name transforms it into a masculine personification.
Like taking the concept of the anointed one and making it Christus, or taking an honorific and making it Augustus?
Precisely. It takes an abstract concept, or in this case, a feminine earth energy, and embodies it into a male form or a patriarchal structure. When Nostradamus created the word MABUS, the report argues he was creating a very specific, deliberate code. He was essentially saying, here is a male entity or a modern structured geopolitical nation that is currently endowed with the ancient, aggressive, sovereign energy of Mab.
It's like how we use language today to personify huge systems.
How do you mean?
Like we say Uncle Sam to represent the entire apparatus of the United States government, its military, its economy. It gives a human face to a massive abstract machine.
That is a perfect analogy.
So Nostradamus was using MABUS as the Uncle Sam for this ancient goddess of war and nature.
Yes. MABUS represents a contemporary geopolitical entity that currently holds the mantle of this ancient goddess. It is a nation or a global apparatus that wields immense power over sovereignty, war, and the shaping of the physical world.
Which completely shifts how we read the prophecy. MABUS will soon die. It doesn't mean a politician has a heart attack. It means the nation or the geopolitical structure holding this massive energy of war and sovereignty will collapse.
Right.
Or that energy will be suddenly severed from it.
And returning to your earlier metaphor, that is the retaining wall.
Right.
When that structure collapses, the text says the horrible undoing follows. The thirst, the hunger, the vengeance of nature, the comet.
Okay, but this is where I really have to push back on the source material.
Fair enough.
If Nostradamus is describing a historical mechanism like a massive geopolitical entity holding the energy of nature and war and its death, somehow causing a global physical cataclysm, how does that actually work?
It's a big leap.
It is. Are we saying the Earth's tectonic plates or passing comets care who the global superpower is? How does the text explain the actual physics or metaphysics of that connection?
It's a vital point of skepticism. The report tackles this by diving into Hermetic philosophy, which was central to Nostradamus' worldview. The core tenet is, as above, so below. In this framework, the Earth is not a dead rock. It is a highly reactive, living system. Human consciousness, macro geopolitics, and planetary cycles are deeply entangled.
So they feed off each other.
The report argues that when a massive human power structure, a MABUS, reaches the end of its energetic life cycle, the resulting friction doesn't just cause political wars, it causes a resonant disruption in the Earth's own biosphere.
So it's not that a human king dying makes a volcano erupt out of grief.
No.
It's that the human era and the planetary era are locked on the same energetic clock. When the alarm rings, everything shifts at once.
Exactly. It's a systemic reset.
Yeah.
And the most compelling part of the research report is that it doesn't just ask us to take this as a neat metaphysical theory.
It gives examples.
It asks, has this ever actually happened before? Is there a historical precedent where this specific cycle played out? And the source material says, yes, absolutely, and it gives us an exact date.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because we aren't just talking about vague, spooky poetry or esoteric philosophy anymore. We are talking about atmospheric comet airbursts and Icelandic volcanoes verified by modern geologists.
Real, hard science.
Yes, the report pinpoints the year 536 AD.
It argues that the catastrophic events described in Century 2, Quatrain 62, the comet, the starvation, the vengeance of nature, are not just a vague vision of our future.
Right.
They are a precise, retroactive description of historical and scientific data from the 6th century.
Let's look at the specific line in the quatrain when the comet will run. In astronomy, comets are usually these slow-moving objects, right?
Annually, yes.
You see them in the night sky over weeks or months, slowly drifting. But the historical records from 530 AD, just 6 years prior to the Great Cataclysm of 536, note something entirely different.
Yes, the Chinese and European historical documents from 530 AD independently record the appearance of Halley's Comet, but they specifically described it as a running star. It didn't just drift, it moved with intense, unnatural speed and extreme brightness, dominating the sky for 20 days.
It was a visible omen. But what followed in its wake, scientifically, is staggering. 6 years later, in 536 AD, the Earth experienced what modern scientists refer to as the dust veil.
A mysterious, dense fog that plunged Europe, Britain, and especially Ireland, the historical and mythological home of the MAB energy, into total darkness.
The sun was dimmed. It didn't just get a little cloudy.
No.
The historical records say the sun gave no more light than the moon, and this lasted for 18 grueling months.
Global temperatures plummeted, summer essentially vanished, snow fell in China in August.
Wow.
And the research report cites the scientific causes behind this dust veil because it wasn't just one thing. It was a brutal 1-2 cosmic punch.
Okay, what was the first punch?
First, geologists have found evidence of a massive volcanic eruption in Iceland, which spewed millions of tons of sulfur and ash into the atmosphere.
And second, what scientists call a comet impact, but more accurately, an airburst.
Right.
The leading theory cited in the report is that a massive fragment of Halley's Comet trailing behind the main body that ran across the sky in 530 AD entered Earth's atmosphere in 536 AD and exploded in the air before hitting the ground.
Like the Tunguska event in Russia in 1908, but on a massive global scale.
Exactly. An atmospheric airburst kicks up an incomprehensible amount of dust and debris without leaving a traditional crater. Combine that global debris cloud with an Icelandic volcano, and you get an 18-month global blackout.
This is the crux of the report's argument regarding Nostradamus. It proves he wasn't just throwing darts at a board to predict a random future event.
He was observing a cycle.
He was recognizing a cyclical pattern. He saw the historical correlation between the running comet, the celestial disruption, and the subsequent vengeance on the ground. He was describing a mechanical function of the universe.
So we have the scientific reality of this era-ending reset in 536 AD. But the report doesn't just leave it at ice cores and geological data.
No, it goes deeper into the human experience.
Right. It actually looks at what 18 months of darkness does to the human psyche. It looks at the historical records from the people living right in the heart of MAB's territory, Ireland.
It relies heavily on the Annals of Ulster. These were ancient Irish texts, meticulously written and preserved by monks, documenting the day-to-day realities of their history.
This is where the abstract numbers become terrifyingly human.
They really do. The monks recorded the utter devastation. They wrote about the sun dimming, the crops failing entirely. They documented a specific period between 536 and 539 AD, which they called the failure of bread.
Think about the language in Nostradamus' quatrain again. Thirst, hunger, and vengeance. The Annals of Ulster describe horrific, inescapable famine. Without the sun, nothing grew. The rivers likely suffered from the atmospheric fallout, becoming toxic or choked with ash. The suffering was absolute.
And put yourself in their shoes for a second. You're a farmer in 6th century Ireland. You don't have satellite weather tracking.
You don't even know what Iceland is, probably.
Exactly. You have no concept of Icelandic volcanoes or atmospheric comet airbursts. You are living a deeply agrarian life, completely dependent on the seasons.
Right.
And one day the sun just goes dark. And your crops die, not just for a bad season, but for 3 years.
Yeah, you would absolutely think the Earth was actively, consciously trying to punish you. You would think this was deliberate vengeance.
Exactly. And the research report introduces a vital concept here. It frames this period of devastation as a filter process or a loyalty test for humanity.
Filter process.
Yes. It wasn't just bad weather, it was a fundamental disruption and evaluation of the human trajectory.
A filter process. I really want to linger on that because that is a loaded term.
It is.
A filter traps the impurities and only lets certain things pass through. The report suggests that nature, acting with the raw, brutal energy of MAB, was filtering humanity. What exactly does it mean to be filtered in this context?
Well, the psychological impact of total ecological collapse cannot be overstated. When the crops fail year after year, the old systems of survival shatter. But more importantly, the old systems of belief completely shatter under the weight of this filter process. The people looked at their pagan rituals, their offerings to the ancient deities, perhaps even to Meb herself, and realized none of it was bringing the sun back.
The gods had either abandoned them or the gods were the ones punishing them.
Exactly.
The retaining wall of their societal structure had fallen, and they were drowning in the aftermath. The old world view was the impurity caught in the filter.
Which leads us to the most profound part of this historical analysis. What happens after a filter process? What emerges on the other side of an 18-month apocalypse?
Because humanity didn't end in 536 AD.
Right, the aftermath. And this is where the story takes a massive, deeply counterintuitive turn. The report highlights that the collapse of the old order directly birthed a golden age.
Wait, really? A golden age right after that?
Yes. The 536 AD cataclysm absolutely destroyed the old religious and societal order in Ireland. The population went through unimaginable trauma. But the consequence of that trauma was a complete radical paradigm shift. The Irish completely abandoned their ancient tribal worship of Queen Med.
They let go of the energy of war and raw, brutal sovereignty. They realized it couldn't save them.
Yes. And they embraced Christianity en masse. But they didn't just passively adopt a new religion. They became the vanguard of it.
Wow.
From roughly 550 AD to 850 AD, following this period of utter darkness, Ireland experienced an unprecedented spiritual and intellectual revolution.
The report refers to this era as the golden age of saints and scholars, and the contrast here is incredible.
It's night and day.
While the rest of the European continent was languishing in the darkest depths of the Dark Ages, grappling with the fall of the Roman Empire, barbarian invasions, and the ongoing effects of the 536 AD climate disaster, these Irish monks were doing something extraordinary.
They were building monasteries that became beacons of light on the edge of the known world. They were meticulously copying and preserving the ancient texts of Western civilization, Greek philosophy, science, early theology.
So they were saving the knowledge.
Exactly. They were expanding education and eventually traveling back across a ruined Europe to reintroduce this knowledge. They essentially saved Western civilization.
So let me get this straight. The absolute worst year to be alive in human history, the starvation, the darkness, the catastrophic death of MABUS's old energy, actually triggered one of the greatest eras of learning and preservation in human history.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, yes.
Is the deep dive source arguing that sheer destruction is a prerequisite for a golden age?
That is exactly the thesis of the research report. The Earth's cataclysmic reset acts as a painful but entirely necessary pruning.
Like trimming a tree.
Exactly. Just as you have to cut back the dead, diseased branches of a tree to allow new growth, the ecological filter process of 536 AD pruned away a stagnant martial era. It forced a terrifying humility on the population, which allowed a much more enlightened, scholarly, and spiritual era to bloom.
The death of MABUS is the fertilizer for the golden age. It is a terrifying cycle, but it has a distinct evolutionary purpose. The world wasn't ending, it was molting.
And this historical lesson from 536 AD isn't just an interesting history lesson to keep in a museum archive. According to the source material we are analyzing today, it is a functional blueprint.
Okay.
And it is a blueprint for right now.
Which brings us to the final and undoubtedly the most urgent section of the report, the modern replay.
Right.
The document asserts that this exact cosmic and geopolitical cycle is repeating in the modern era, and it pinpoints a highly specific window between the years 2022 and 2032 or 2033.
Now, before we unpack the mechanics of this, it is crucial to state clearly that we are neutrally reporting the analytical claims mythed within this specific research document.
Yes, very important.
The source material delves into highly charged modern geopolitics. We are not endorsing any political viewpoint, left-wing or right-wing, nor are we making our own predictions about world events.
Exactly. We're just the messengers here.
We're simply examining how the author of the source material applies the historical framework of the MABUS prophecy to our current geopolitical landscape.
Absolutely. Our job is to walk through the logic of the report, no matter where it points. And the logic presented is that the current manifestation of MABUS is decoded literally as MAB plus U.S. the United States.
The source posits that just as the events of 536 AD centered heavily on Ireland, which was the mythological land of Mab, the current epical shift centers on the United States.
Okay.
In the framework of this theory, the U.S. currently holds the Mab energy.
Meaning the U.S. currently holds the mantle of global sovereignty and the capacity for immense war and martial force.
Yes.
It is the reigning superpower, the modern structural equivalent of the ancient warrior queen commanding the global landscape.
Furthermore, the text introduces a vital astrological concept to explain the quality of this modern energy, stating that this era is characterized by Rahu-driven diplomacy.
Okay, we need to pause and dig into that because Rahu is not a term most people use in casual conversation.
No, it's pretty esoteric.
What is Rahu, and why is the report tying Vedic astrology to a French prophet and a Celtic goddess?
It's a fascinating synthesis. In Vedic astrology, Rahu is not a physical planet, it is the north lunar node. But astrologically and mythologically, Rahu represents illusion, a deep material obsession, and a kind of insatiable earthly appetite.
Interesting.
It is the shadow entity that causes eclipses, literally swallowing the sun or the moon.
Oh, wow.
When the report describes Rahu-driven diplomacy, it means a global political system driven by smoke and mirrors, immense material greed, and an insatiable desire for dominance disguised as conventional statecraft.
So, diplomacy driven by material obsession and illusion, backed by the raw, brutal martial power of the Mab energy. That is the current state of the MABUS entity, according to the report.
Yes.
A superpower operating under the influence of eclipse energy.
Therefore, we return to the core prophecy, MABUS will soon die. In the modern context, the report interprets this not necessarily as the physical, apocalyptic destruction of a geographic country, but as the severing of this specific energy.
The Mab element, this aggressive, martial, Rahu-driven dominant energy, will be disconnected from the United States.
When this disconnection occurs, the theory suggests that the United States will become ineffective, paralyzed, or neutralized on the global stage.
The wall falls.
It will no longer hold the retaining wall of global sovereignty. The hegemony ends.
And we remember what happens when the retaining wall falls.
Mm-hmm.
Or, to evolve the metaphor based on what we learned about 536 AD, it's not just a wall falling. It's like the Earth's immune system reacting to a fever breaking.
That's a good way to put it.
Just as in 536 AD, the report claims that the Earth itself will then step in to auto-restore. The text explicitly aligns this upcoming period with severe natural changes, earthquakes, famine, pandemics, the horrible undoing of people and animals.
The geopolitical structure losing its dominance is the trigger. It is the signal that the human era has exhausted itself, and the ecological filter process must begin.
So the planet takes over.
Exactly. The Earth reacts to the shift in human energy by instituting a harsh physical reset.
So what does this all mean for us, sitting here reading the news today, watching the absolute chaos on the global stage?
It's a lot to process.
According to this document, the political turmoil, the deeply polarized shifting alliances, the wars, and the systemic crises we are seeing globally right now, they aren't just regular geopolitical friction.
No.
They're the friction of this Mab energy forcibly detaching. It's the sound of the retaining wall cracking under cosmic pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And when it finally snaps entirely, according to the timeline of 2022 to 2032, the Earth itself takes over the process of restructuring.
To synthesize the entire document, MABUS is not a man. MABUS is a cosmic season.
A season, I like that.
The death of MABUS is the end of the current geopolitical hegemony. It serves as a necessary programmatic trigger for a global ecological filter process.
Right.
And this process, as terrifying as the text describes it with thirst, hunger, and natural vengeance, is ultimately designed with a profound purpose.
About the new era.
Exactly. It is designed to pave the way for a new golden age, just as it did for those Irish monks in the 6th century.
It's a complete reframing of how we look at times of global crisis. We've taken a massive journey today, and I'm speaking directly to you, the listener, now.
It's a lot of ground to cover.
We have gone from what most people thought was a misread 16th century poem about a cartoonish bad guy, and we've traced it back to ancient Celtic goddesses holding living birds on their shoulders.
Yeah.
We stood in the freezing, darkened, ash-choked skies of 536 AD with Irish monks writing by candlelight, and we brought all of that historical weight forward to the geopolitical transitions happening right outside our windows in the 2020s.
It forces us to look beyond the immediate anxiety of the headlines and consider the vast cyclical nature of planetary time. It asks us to see the mechanics of history, not just the drama of it.
It really does. It takes the sheer panic of the modern news cycle and places it on a timeline that is thousands of years long. It gives it a deeply strange but undeniable sense of order.
And that leaves us with a final thought to ponder, something that builds on all this historical and metaphysical data we've covered today.
Oh, lay it on me.
If the historical dark ages and the catastrophic resets of the past were not actually the end of the world, but were instead the Earth's necessary filter processes designed to burn away the old, to birth a golden age of enlightenment and preservation, how does that change your perspective on the turbulent, often frightening events we are living through right now?
Wow.
What if you aren't living through the end of the world, but just the painful, necessary birth of a much better one?
What if the dust veil is just hiding the seeds being planted? That is a powerful, challenging thought to carry with you. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the conventional narratives. Keep exploring the hidden connections between the ancient past and the present. And remember that even when the retaining wall falls, there is always a new landscape waiting on the other side. Until next time.